Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about a massive severe weather event that'll be taking place across the United States over the next couple of days. This will bring the risk for significant damaging winds, large to very large hail, and perhaps a few tornadoes. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll first begin with the Central Plains, and that is where there is a lot of shower and storm activity that's been ongoing throughout the late morning and early afternoon, and this is actually associated with an outflow boundary. So we've seen storms dive into areas like Oklahoma and actually approaching North Texas right now, so interesting stuff happening there. And this is the prerequisite to what we'll see later this afternoon in terms of a severe weather event. It won't really be an outbreak today, but we will be watching at least for some significant severe weather. Tomorrow is when we could see a severe weather outbreak across portions of the Central Plains. I'll talk about more on that here in just a moment. Further down to the south and east, showers and storms continue as we pass through the 4th of July. We're down to July 5th. Obviously, storm activity still ongoing. There's some lightning associated with those storms, so if you still have any festivities ongoing, make sure you're weather aware. That'll continue. And then dry weather continues across areas in the Northeast, something that those areas have not really seen much of recently, but it's a little bit drier up there with an isolated chance for some showers and storms later today. Now, before I go further into this weather forecast, I did want to mention that yesterday, July 4th of 2023, was the hottest day recorded in Earth's history, and that's unbelievable. Obviously, you can see here in the United States, this was yesterday's high temperatures. Doesn't seem to be that extreme in the United States. Like, we're not really looking at that many 100-degree areas, but if you look back up in northern Canada, one area reached 93 degrees in northern Canada. That's never happened that far north in history. So again, very hot yesterday, and it was again the hottest day in Earth's history, which is quite wild. We've been seeing an unbelievable El Nino pattern, and in addition to that, there is that threat of climate change providing this record-breaking heat in the United States and across the country, which is obviously very concerning. So there is a lot to talk about in terms of this topic, but we're going to get back into the weather forecast, and we have a very interesting pattern. Again, the jet stream's kind of in a weird spot right now. It's way off to the north, which this does happen during this time of the year, but the trough that we have is all the way back up in Canada right now with some stronger upper level winds primarily across the northern plains and back into areas like Canada. But over the next few days, we're going to see an interesting pattern where we're going to see a little weak trough develop. Now, at the surface, these low pressure systems are a bit stronger, but this will allow for a little bit more of an increased upper level wind dynamics across the Central Plains, and this could help aid the threat for severe weather in certain areas, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then once we go into the weekend, not really a whole lot of organized systems. Once we go into Sunday into Monday, again, not really anything that organized. Very interesting setup though as we go next week, where we will have a heat dome back in the southwest United States, trough back down into the southeast United States, so things will come active again over on the eastern half of the United States. Meanwhile, the western half of the country, going into early next week, will begin to get a lot drier. In addition to that, a lot warmer, so definitely concerning stuff there. Now, severe weather will ramp up over the next couple of days, but beginning with today, we have a very interesting setup. So we have one area to watch for back over in the Midwest. There is a slight risk of severe weather near Chicago as well as southeast Wisconsin. Primary threat for today is damaging winds and maybe some large hail. Not too concerning though. It should remain a fairly widely scattered event in terms of severe weather. We will see some numerous storm activity though, so there will be some lightning, gusty winds associated with a lot of those storms across the Midwest. Further down to the south and east, we'll have some sporadic storms develop later today. Damaging winds, large hail, the main concerns, but it's nothing significant. Damaging winds up to 65 miles per hour, large hail up to about ping pong ball sized hail is really my only concerns across the southeast United States today. For those in the Central Plains, different story here. We're going to possibly see an MCS develop later today. That could pose a threat for damaging winds and large hail, but out of those initial cells, damaging winds, large to even very large hail, and perhaps a brief tornado are the main concerns, especially across southeast Colorado. That is where I think the greatest concern is today for some severe weather. And also, here's the tornado risk. So again, it's primarily focused across southeast Colorado, back into the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, so make sure you're staying weather aware, have a tornado action plan just in case. Let's begin with the timing in the Midwest, and then we'll go back down into the southern and central plains. Beginning with this afternoon, storms will start to fire up. Really, they're going to fire off quite quickly around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock this afternoon. We're going to see some storms really fire off quickly though. Again, a lot of these will not be severe, but the ones that are will produce some damaging winds and large hail. And just a reminder, the tornado risk is not zero, but it is extremely low, so I'm not really concerned about that. Just have a tornado action plan in place just in case. Really, more than anything, just have ways to receive alerts just in case. But I think most of the threats today are just some widely scattered damaging winds with maybe a little bit of sporadic hail. By this evening, storms will roll towards Chicago as well as into eastern Wisconsin. They'll eventually cross the Great Lakes, where they're going to start to weaken out during the overnight hours. So closer around 10 to 11 o'clock, really, that's when it will start to weaken out in Michigan. We might see some lightning, maybe some gusty winds, but again, nothing that crazy there, so no concerns for that region. Now, the southern and central plains are a bit different. We're going to see some discrete cells actually potentially fire off initially during the late afternoon, possibly in northern Oklahoma, as well as back into northeast New Mexico and southeast Colorado. Those are the areas that I'm most concerned about for the initial threat of large to very large hail, possibly as high as baseball-sized hail as possible today. And then by the evening hours, we'll have a threat for maybe an MCS, but again, it's kind of uncertain whether this will actually evolve. You'll notice the HRR model by around midnight tonight is showing the threat for maybe a linear line of storms, but it's very disorganized and not really in the position where we'd be seeing widespread or even numerous damaging winds. It'd just be more of an isolated to widely scattered threat, but make sure you're seeing weather aware. That'll push down to the south and east, and it might last through the morning hours, possibly even through lunchtime tomorrow, as far south and east as Arkansas. Now, tomorrow's severe weather threat, a bit more concerning for tossing trampolines on trees Thursday. We do have an enhanced risk of severe weather. It does include Colorado, Kansas, and as well as northern parts of Oklahoma. And again, it's not huge and it's not in a very populated area, but we do have a concern here for damaging winds that could be very well significant, large to very large hail, and perhaps a few tornadoes. Slight risk does go all the way back up into Montana and as well as far south as Oklahoma. And then we have a marginal threat from Mississippi all the way back through Montana. It's a very large area tomorrow, so definitely concerning because we are watching a very large area. Currently, though, again, damaging winds is the main concern. We could see damaging winds as high as 80 miles per hour in that hatched region. That does include areas like Kansas. Again, in that enhanced risk of severe weather. This may change a little bit, though, over the next 12 to 24 hours. And then our large hail threat is also concerning. You'll notice there's a hatched area. This means we could see hail exceeding 2 inches in diameter. My current maximum hail threat for tomorrow is currently sitting around 3.5 inches in diameter. So that's the maximum hailstone size that I foresee tomorrow, but we could again see a little bit larger and also a little bit smaller than that. That's just kind of my forecast for right now. Tornado risk, it's not really high. It's on the lower side still. We have that 5% chance east of Denver in Colorado, so definitely a concern here in eastern Colorado for a few tornadoes. Make sure you're staying weather aware tomorrow. It's a possibility. Again, not everybody's going to see severe weather, but those that do, they could be quite significant. Now let's talk about the timing. We'll begin with around 6 o'clock tomorrow. We'll see some showers and storms fire off across areas like northeast Colorado, back through Wyoming. These are the ones that'll produce large to very large hail initially with perhaps an isolated tornado. Notice right around 8 o'clock, though, the storms are not very widespread. These are going to be fairly isolated storms initially, and you'll actually notice back over in western Nebraska, look at that discrete cell that the HR model is picking up on right now. That is going to be a bit of a concern. If any of these discrete cells are, again, really separated from any other storm activity, we are going to see an increased risk for a tornado. So definitely watch out for that tomorrow evening. Make sure you're staying weather aware. By 9 to 10 o'clock, storms continue to move off to the east. They become a bit more scattered to numerous across areas like the Central Plains and even another area back up in South Dakota and northern Nebraska. That is where we could also see some significant damaging winds unfold. And then overnight, we'll see storms collapse down to the south and east. A lot of this will just be rain and lightning, but there will be some chances for some damaging winds up to around 65 miles per hour as it goes down through areas like Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and even perhaps Iowa as well. And then as we go into Flying Fences Friday, we do currently have a slight risk of severe weather in the Central Plains. I will talk about more on this in the next forecast. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like the button down below and subscribe if you're not already.